The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report, and we have with us today Jonathan Rosen, who's, I guess he's one of the young Turks of Jewish literacy. If we had Bob Weil on, he'd tell you he's the up-and-coming man who sort of going to replace the Herman Malamuds and the Herman Wokes, etc., etc. We had him on a couple of years ago, and he used to be, I think, a literary editor of the Forward magazine, Forward newspaper, were you? Literary,
yes, I was the culture editor.
Cultures, but you've since gone to different pastures.
That's right.
So you wrote a book called The Talmud and the Internet.
Yes.
Now, don't get out of step on this one. He doesn't really write about the Talmud. What he's trying to do is forge the old and the new together and see where we are in this world. He's basically a very bright philosophical human being, and he's married to a woman who is a rabbi, if I remember correctly. Right, John?
Yep, she's a conservative rabbi.
And she ministers in hospitals. That she used to do that, right?
Yep.
Still doing that?
She just went back to work. She took 9 months off after the birth of our daughter, Ariella.
Congratulations.
And now she trains, thank you, rabbis to be chaplains.
Really? All right, The Talmud and the Internet. It's a great title. It encapsulates a lot of thought. It brings people closer, because a lot of people don't even know what the Talmud is. And why such an interesting title?
It's a good question. In a way, I do talk about the Talmud and I do talk about the Internet, but I suppose...
But it's a metaphor for you.
It is a metaphor, that's exactly right. And in the broadest sense, it's about, the subtitle is A Journey Between Worlds. And in this case, the worlds are the ancient religious world that the Talmud represents for me, and the modern, secular, technological world that I suppose the Internet represents for me. And how on earth do you integrate these two worlds, which seem so far apart and seem so different?
All right, how do you do it?
Well, you toggle between them.
You read this book.
You read the book, that's right. In some sense, I really don't try to integrate them, but in another way, I have to say that there are certain similarities, superficial physical similarities and also metaphorical similarities that I think are worth thinking about or talking about. A page of Talmud is made up of all sorts of conversations, and you'd almost call them text boxes if you look at a page of Talmud. The rabbis interrupt each other, rabbis argue with other rabbis from hundreds of years ago.
Let's explain to our audience what Talmud is.
Sure.
Let's explain it. Many people who watch this are not Jewish.
Okay. I don't think I can explain the Talmud standing on one foot, as a famous Talmudic rabbi once said, but I would say that in its broadest sense, the Talmud is the discussion of Jewish law. It is a series of conversations about what it means to live as a Jew.
With a series of a lot of interpretations by a lot of famous rabbinical scholars.
That's right. And those conversations are packed with folklore, story, legal disputation, biblical exegesis, biblical commentary. In a sense, they are trying to interpret the Word of God not as it was written down in the 5 books of Moses, but as it was, as the Talmud says about itself, sort of whispered in the ear of Moses, that there was the written law, which is the 5 books of Moses and the prophets and the writings, and then there is the oral law. The oral law was kind of in the air, the conversations that accompany the written law.
Rabbi.
That's right.
And a lot of commentary on the Bible itself, on the Torah.
That's right.
Is in the Talmud.
It is a vast, ever-expanding universe of language and words and thought. And in fact, there's a line from the Talmud that somebody says to describe the Talmud: turn it and turn it, for everything is in it, which is the epigraph to my first chapter, because in a weird, strange way, it seemed like a kind of rough analogy to what one might say about this vast world of the Internet, which is just so much information that there's no way to really find yourself inside of it.
But you know, the Talmud's really being incorporated into the dictionary, because when you get into a very complicated, confused topic, they say, well, you sound Talmudic. And I think that really explains what the Talmud is. You can
I
have
have to quarrel with that definition, though, a little bit, because it's like Pharisaic, which was a way which is often used to call Jews hair splitters, legalistic, word-obsessed people. And the truth of the matter is the rabbis were these free-thinking, very imaginative, deeply humanistic people. And to be Talmudic is not merely to quibble, but also to sort of think about what it means to be a person in the world.
You misunderstood
No,
me.
I wasn't quarreling with your
No, you
definition.
can. I like to have a
with the
comedic
dictionary,
discussion
right.
with you.
Well, here we go. This is how
I studied Talmud for 18 years.
This is how it
so
happens.
I'd love to quarrel with you, because that's what they do, except
That's right.
they shake a lot, too, when they study Talmud. But what I meant is most people that I know who went to law school with me, and people said to me, well, Leon, you study the Talmud, you have a head start. And there was a lot of theory about that when you learn Talmud at a very young age, you sharpen your mind, and you learn how to argue in a very persuasive way. And this is what the rabbis did. You had two very famous rabbis, Abaye and Hillel, and Rava and Hillel, excuse me. And one was came down sort of as a very conservative guy. The other was more liberal. And these two fellas, rabbis, really were out to belt it out. And people argue over those points together. Today, every night you can see people studying Talmud. It's endless. You just keep studying. So now we know that the Talmud is really, it's the commentary basically on a lot of Jewish war, a lot of law and discussion, and so now we have the Internet. How does that integrate to the Internet?
Let me make one more point about the Talmud that will, I guess, lead me into the comparison to the Internet. When the temple was destroyed in the 1st century, Jews lost the center of their religion.
Temple.
The Jewish temple was destroyed. First Solomon's temple, then Herod's temple, as it's often called. They essentially packed their culture into books. The Talmud, which was essentially meant to remain the oral, flexible, conversational commentary on the written word of the Bible, was in fact transcribed. It wasn't so quickly cause and effect, but it is how the Jews survived 2,000 years of exile. They took their culture with them, and they took it with them in the Talmud, which is to say, in books.
By the way, you
can
read the Talmud is in Aramaic. And you can read the Talmud in English today. There have been many translations about I think Sonsino has one, Adam Steinholtz.
Adrian Steinholtz is working his way through the Talmud.
There are how many tractates in the Talmud?
I don't know.
30?
No.
Okay, we're both stumped. Someone will email us tomorrow and tell us. I forgot.
They certainly will.
I remember you can study marriage, you can study divorce, you can study death, you can study negligence, you can study torts, you can study property. It's like going to law school, believe me. So,
but the truth is, I am not in any way a Talmud scholar at all. I have studied Talmud with friends. I have studied Talmud in Hebrew school. I have studied Talmud with teachers. And I am, as you say, using it as not just a metaphor for the religious world, but as a way of talking about the religious world that I am straining towards, trying to participate in, even as I try to...
All right, let's talk about that. You see what's going on in Israel, especially if your wife is a conservative rabbi. She cannot be an Orthodox rabbi. What is happening, in your opinion, between the secularists and the Orthodox in Israel today? Are they able to bridge that gap?
It's interesting. I think Israel has a real crisis on its hands. And I think that American Jews are very lucky, because American Jews actually have a very large, healthy middle. The middle is, you can be conservative Judaism, it can be Reform Judaism, it can be modern Orthodoxy, it can be secular Jews who are eager to incorporate aspects of religious life into their homes. Israel is a world of much starker contrast. It seems to me there are the very secular who built the country, and there are the very religious. And it doesn't yet have the healthy middle that America, maybe because it's so large, and because it's such an accepting place, has. And
can they have a middle, do you think?
That, I think, is a test of the country. I think as it gets older and more stable, it will begin. The secularists are gradually realizing that they gave up perhaps more than they ought to have or needed to, and one hopes that the very religious will discover that they live in a state that is maintained by Jews who had secular as well as religious impulses guiding them, and that there can be some kind of accommodation between the two of them. Right now, it's not looking so good, but I'm pretty hopeful about it.
And if they don't accommodate, what happens?
If they don't accommodate, we'll see what happens. I don't know. There are also a lot of Russians there changing the equation. I genuinely don't know what will happen.
Many of the Russians, by the way, are not Jews by birth. That's a big problem in Israel also, because of the conversion problem. And we're going to ask you these questions, because Judaism is that it's at a turning point right now, in my opinion, both American and Israeli Judaism.
Right.
And it's fascinating because you have Joe Lieberman, who's now an observant Jew going for the president or vice presidency of the United States, which has totally changed everybody's understanding of Judaism because he's enlightened a lot of people through it.
Right. On
the other hand, I heard that he made a remark the other day that he was not against conversions for Jews in terms of marriage. I don't know if you heard that.
No, explain that to me.
Well, basically Judaism does not like conversions. You're not supposed to convert to be able to marry someone. You're supposed to convert because you think it's the way you feel and you want to do it. And if you go through a real religious conversion, rabbis will try to tell you not to do it. They try to dissuade you. It's
Right,
sort of negative sin. Now, I saw this, a Jerusalem Post had some kind of report on this, and the Orthodox rabbis went up in furor. They went really they went really wild against Lieberman. And Lieberman is, in a sense, a big box because he is an observant Jew in his private life, but if he serves the country, he, in a sense, must be pluralistic because the country serves for pluralism. Right. Same thing about Abe Foxman, I saw Foxman 2 weeks ago. His big letter to Lieberman was, in a way, don't put us in a bind so that the Christian right will have the same theories about the Orthodox Jews, and we'll have a country divided by God, and there'll be no more pluralism. So what you have written could be very important right now, and especially, I don't know if you knew that Lieberman was going to be nominated, but I bet
certainly
you
did not.
Your book will sell better now because of the fact that there's a lot of interest in Judaism.
It's possible. It's possible that this is a moment where people have an increased curiosity. I mean, I think the nomination of Lieberman is a watershed event, really, in American history as well as American Jewish history.
It's a watershed event in Jewish history, not only American.
No, but I think it is also a watershed event in American history because it is what could be argued to be a Christian culture acknowledging that a Jew, in fact, not just shares the same values, but perhaps has access to the very values that produced the values of the American culture.
All right, so question arises. I had Bob Tisch on my show the other day, and I said, Bob, when you were growing up, would you believe that you would see a Jewish nominee for Vice President of the United States, the head of the World Bank, Jim Wolfson, as a Jew, the head of the Federal Reserve was probably the most important man in America or the world today, is Greenspan, and even Rubin, who is the Secretary of the Treasury. What is that good for Judaism in America? Is it bad? Are we going too far? Will it rise to give anti-Semitism? What's your feeling about that?
I don't know how to answer that. I never think that you should worry that their behavior is going to bring about anti-Semitism because I don't believe anti-Semitism is a result of Jewish behavior. I think it's a product of anti-Semitism. The reason Lieberman seems different to me from those other names is because he is actually a practicing Jew. The fact that Jews go far in public life has been true for a long time, and people react to it as they react to it. A lot of people who go far in public life disappear as Jews, and they are simply public figures. Lieberman is there as a Jew. He's there as an American politician who literally draws his values from the Bible and from Jewish culture, and that, I think, is an amazing event.
Okay, so march Lieberman into your book right now.
I don't think I could do that, except that I would say that Lieberman lives between worlds. And my book is, in its larger sense, about living between worlds. And I actually think, and this is a point that's very important for me to make, that Judaism is remarkably well adapted to the modern world. That the broken voices that were compiled in the Talmud and that sustained Jews for 2,000 years were actually a way of finding a kind of rough harmony in the disunity of the destruction of the temple. And Jews were used to living amid competing voices. Argument didn't mean the end of truth, it meant the beginning of truth. There was no fundamentalism built into the Talmud in that sense, because two rabbis, even if they disagree, are both reproduced in the Talmud. And though I would not make any religious claims for the internet, it is absolutely devoid of the moral center that governs the Talmud, which was trying to figure out what God wanted of people. I would say that many people who are fearful of the internet and who fear that all these multiple voices and all these new technologies will destroy the book will destroy the harmony of our thought, would do well to consider that long before Gutenberg, Jews were surviving in exile with their culture intact because of the Talmud. And it wasn't a monolithic approach. It was a polyphonic approach. It was many voices. And so that's one of the things that I draw inspiration from and strength from. And there's a chapter which is very much about that, about the way in which I think that the Talmud and the internet is a really healthy way, a paradigm for thinking about living in the modern world and living in the religious world as well.
So you think that the fact that the Talmud incorporated all types of opinions and all types of arguments from different rabbis, at the end it still came down to, in a sense, one compendium of thought, and in a way harmonized the people. It did not give them disunity. Is that what you're trying to say?
That's right. There's a really famous essay that I write about by Henry Adams, who was actually descended from 2 American presidents and wrote a very famous autobiography, The Education of Henry Adams. In 1900, he went to the World's Fair and he visited the Hall of Dynamos, where there were all these incredible machines because electricity had just been invented. And he wrote an essay called The Dynamo and the Virgin. For Henry Adams, the Virgin was religious culture and life. He wrote a book about cathedrals, which is very beautiful and very well known. And the dynamo is the world of modern technology and industry. And for him, America. The Virgin is primal, European, pious religious life, and the dynamo is modern technology in America. And for him, these two are irreconcilable. You can either be an industrialist and lose God, or you can be a dark believer. He wanted to be a believer, but he felt he couldn't be, and so he really lived a shattered, split life. What I would say is that if you consider the model of the Talmud and the internet, in a way you can integrate those elements. And Adams, who I admire as a writer enormously, was a terrible anti-Semite. And I can't help thinking that if he had that more accommodating worldview, it might have opened him up a little bit.
You think so?
Yes, I do.
All right, we're going to cut for a break. We'll come right back. This is really fascinating and very important because I think Judaism is in a tremendous turmoil right now, and there's a lot of questions about whether there will be Jews in 50 years because of assimilation. I personally believe there'll be plenty of Jews in 50 years from now, and I disagree with Alan Dershowitz, who wrote, I think, a thesis about this, and we'll see what Jonathan says, and then we'll ask him what he thinks a practicing Jew is. We'll be right back.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD in Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Mole Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs in Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
We're back. I'm Leon Charney. I'm talking with Jonathan Rosen, who's a great author, and he's written a book called The Talmud and the Internet. It's not fiction like his other book. This is real. And what he is doing, in my opinion, and he may correct me, is showing that the old world and the new world of the new telecommunications, Internet, etc., can really combine, and they can learn from the experience of the old to bring them together. They don't have to be, in a sense, antagonistic to one another. They can combine and be together, and you'll have a richer life. Not like Henry Adams, who didn't think industrialists could be religious. Is that the
in a nutshell?
In a nutshell,
it'll serve. Yeah.
All right. You wrote this book. Why?
I can tell you how it started. I can't
That's
say
good
exactly
enough.
why. It really began as an elegy for my grandmother, which may sound strange given the fact that it's called The Talmud and the Internet, especially since I explain in a note to the reader that my grandmother didn't actually care about either the Talmud or the Internet.
Is that right?
No. She died at the age of almost 95. She was a secular, assimilated child of immigrants born
Really?
in the Lower East Side. But somehow, I'd been keeping a journal while she was dying, and very soon after she died, my computer crashed. And there's something about trying to recover the words that I lost that and trying to recover my actual memories of my grandmother, and trying to recover the world that my grandmother came from, and trying to recover that the world that produced the people that my grandmother came from, led me to think about my own relationship to and all the multiple worlds that I've actually inherited. And so the book gave me a chance to write about
Your mother
things
was an
I've been thinking for a
American-born
long time.
woman?
Yes. My father was born in Vienna. My mother was born in this country, and one of the things the book is really a series of oppositions. It's not just the Talmud and the Internet. And one of the things I write about is my other grandmother. The grandmother who died, whose death occasioned the beginning of this book, was born in the Lower East Side, lived a long and what I would have to call lucky and prosperous American life. My other grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was murdered in the Holocaust. She was shot. And it's almost impossible for me to hold the idea of these two grandmothers together at the same time. One of them was always a ghost. One of them is evocative for me of the European world of tragedy, the world of suffering. The other I was very close to, I saw all the time, and she is an emblem for me of prosperous, lucky American life. And I am an inheritor of both these things.
So you were trying to integrate them.
I was trying to integrate them, or I was trying to create a space, which I suppose is what the book is, in which they could both live. In which the ghost grandmother, who I never met, who was a symbol of Jewish tragedy and suffering, could somehow live in the same room or the same book or in the same
But you never knew your
world.
paternal grandmother.
I never knew her.
So you know only her history.
I know only her history, but in a sense an interesting thing happened in the course of writing the book, because this woman who had always been an emblem and a symbol to me became more real to me, especially after my grandmother died. Because once my grandmother, to whom I was so close and who I knew so well, sort of entered the world of the dead, became a ghost to me, I realized what it must have been for my murdered grandmother to once have been an actual person. I mean, the Nazis didn't kill a ghost. They killed a flesh and blood woman. And in a strange sense, it's not as if my two grandmothers changed places, but that thinking about the one helped humanize the other. I mean, no one's a symbol. That's the truth. People are human beings. And in a sense, that made the tragedy even more overwhelming.
But you can only focus on the objective tragedy. You know nothing about her personality, the one who died at the hands of the Nazis.
I know only the handful of stories and the single photograph.
It's like the Talmud in your family, about the stories they told about your grandmother. Some people who knew her or knew about her could tell you stories about her. But the other grandmother that lived on the East Side, you knew. You integrated yourself personally with her. You had relationship.
It's true. Although in the end, what you have are stories. Stories are what remain. So.
Okay, but she also had a personality you saw and you observed.
That's right.
And what about grandfathers?
I write about my grandfathers, but...
Did your grandfather from Vienna live? Did you meet him?
No, he was also killed.
He was killed. So you never knew your grandfather and your grandmother?
I never knew
from the paternal side.
That's right. But they continually wove their way into my life. One of the things I talk about in one chapter is how my wife and I planned to get married on November 10th. We hadn't realized until my father pointed it out that November 10th was in fact the anniversary of Kristallnacht, which is the night of broken glass, as it's called.
It's
when
a terrible night in Jewish
Nazis
history.
went around burning synagogues, breaking glass in 1938. It was the night my grandfather was arrested. My father pointed out the irony, although we decided to keep the date. And in a strange way, it was an attempt, I realize now, this was 7 or 8 years ago, to do what I'm doing in the book, to integrate both these things.
Well, when you did your blessings under the chuppah, you broke the glass, which is symbolic of also destruction. At the same time, it's symbolic of joy.
I actually wrote a piece about my wedding anniversary called Breaking Glass.
Really?
In which
I didn't know that. This is not a setup.
The shattered glass that I stepped on and the broken glass of all those windows that gave the name Kristallnacht were sort of fused. At the same time, I don't want to make a metaphor out of actual suffering. That's the challenge. I know that my own life can never, make up for the suffering that all those people experienced, but I don't want to ignore it either. So how do I make a place for it without falsifying my own lucky American life? At the same time, I don't want to grow deaf to suffering just because I didn't live inside of it. And so it's kind of a balancing act. And there is this great computer word, toggle, when you move between two things. One reality never replaces the other. You just have to live in multiple worlds. And that's really what the book is about. It's about living inside of these multiple worlds. I am not a Talmud scholar at all, but I can't dispense with the Talmud. I feel its presence in my life, almost the way I feel the presence of the grandmother I never met. And I know that there are ways of thinking that lived inside the Talmud that came down to me, and a way of looking at the world. And so I study it as best I can. But I'm never a master of it. And in the same way, all this information that comes pouring at me over the internet, which people are always lamenting, I will never master it. No one will ever master it. But the Talmud itself is really about learning how to live inside of chaos. No one ever really is meant to master it. It was never even intended to be written down. That's right.
They keep studying it, and you keep studying and studying and studying.
That's right.
You can never be a master of the Talmud.
That's right. Yours is not, the burden is not to complete the work, neither are you free to desist from it. That is really, and that is something that I try to weave into both the book and I would say my life.
Question. Why did you use your grandmother and not your grandfather's?
My grandfather, who was American-born, died when I was 1.
I see.
And so my grandmother was really a looming, wonderful presence in my life for all of my life until she died 3 years ago. And so she was, for me, what a grandparent was. And that's the only reason. I do mention and write about as best I can.
No, I was just curious, but you answered the question.
That's why. And somehow, because I had in my mind this sense of this grandmother, my other grandmother became a kind of answering image. And the two of, and more than my grandfather, although my murdered grandfather, I am named for my murdered grandfather, and my wife and I were married under the tallis that he had worn on our wedding. So it's not as if he's not a powerful presence in my life.
But you said something very important. I'm not sure you know it, but you really define what a practicing Jew is. This book can tell you what a practicing Jew is. I say, well, you live with the Talmud all your life, although you don't study it or you're not a Talmudic scholar. But the inference of the Talmud, or the fact that the Talmud exists, is to you something very important. And it represents a type of Judaism that you respect very much. So in a sense, you are a practicing Jew because you're incorporating the Talmud into your very existence.
I suppose that's true. And what I would say even more...
I don't want to be a rabbinical scholar here, but this is my own interpretation. And I see it, and it's very important because you are giving a path to a lot of people who are confused now. You know, there's a great schism between Orthodox Reform and conservative Jews, and then the Orthodox are split out into Haredi and to Hasidic communities. And the Reform, by the way, are going more towards tradition now in the conservative movements. You could go into a Reform temple, and years ago you wouldn't see a skull cap, and you wouldn't see a talit, which is a prayer shawl. Today there's a movement towards more tradition. The conservative, I believe your wife would know more about this than I do, I think are moving more to tradition. So there's a lot of convergence here of Judaism.
Right. I think the borders and the boundaries are very flexible, and they are more flexible than people who
But
see
that's not the Orthodox.
Civil War.
Orthodox don't think that way.
I don't know if there's no such thing as simply the Orthodox.
All right,
There's
I
a
will
small
define
population of. Well, you should define it because
I will define it. The modern Orthodox might get along to a certain point, but then they can't. I'll tell you why. Bibi Netanyahu had a man called Brown, I think, Bobby Brown. He was in charge of diaspora Jewry, and he was working like a devil to bring all the elements of Israeli Jews together, especially on the issue of conversion. And I said to him, you know, you can work from now till doomsday, but Rabbi Lau, who's the chief rabbi, Ashkenazi rabbi of Israel, cannot allow anything to go beyond what he thinks is the Orthodox interpretation, because then he's not an Orthodox Jew anymore. Mm-hmm. So what you can have is great dialogues. You can have understanding. The modern Orthodox will give you that. But when you go further down the road to very right-wing Orthodox Jews, I don't believe they can do that. But I'm talking about the middle of the road people, some people who are not modern Orthodox, but let's call them right-wing conservatives. And what you propose and what you give them is the ability to feel the same sense of Judaism as anybody else. That's very, very important in today's society.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm a big believer in the middle, in a broad middle. It's often said, you know, now that the Orthodox are the ones who are masters of Jewish continuity, but the truth is, 100 years ago, millions of refugees came to this country from Orthodox homes, and they're the ones who, by and large, vanished into secular Judaism. It's very possible that if there was at that time a healthy middle that said you could actually both integrate modernity and certain secular impulses and certain Jewish impulses and live an integrated life, that it's possible that they would not have vanished. The choices would not have seemed to be either or. Of course, American culture has changed too. The notion of the melting pot has been replaced by a different notion, that you express your Americanness through your particularity, not at the expense of it. And that, in a sense, brings us back to Lieberman, because the atmosphere of the culture now is so much more accommodating, and that's the amazing thing about America, because it is a culture of immigrants, that you express and explore your individual identity, and you further your Americanness. For me, I wrote this as a Jew, but I see it as an American. I see myself as an American writer, and I'd like to think that there are a lot of people in this country, Jewish or not, who feel they make a journey between worlds, whether it's an immigrant world or a religious world. I think we all live between worlds.
Well, when I was at the convention, and we did a show specifically on the cultural, psychological, and sociological aspects of Lieberman. It's the only thing we did. And I did with a famous philosopher from Israel called Nati Laor, who's also a psychiatrist. And we said, but these were issues, and I need your opinion on this. Lieberman, if he became a president, if Gore resigned and he went to Israel to be an Ola Chadash, let's make him a good exit, and Lieberman became president, he'd have to light the Christmas tree. Would that be a symbol which would be against Judaism, or would it make him less of an observant Jew? Our answer came out that in terms of public posture, he can do those things, and privately he doesn't have to have a Christmas tree in his residence. There's a difference between a public persona and your private life. The same thing, Jews, basically Orthodox Jews, cannot go into churches. It's basically the job of a vice president to go to funerals and churches. How does he handle that? And he answered that question already, because he gave a major speech in a church about 2 or 3 Sundays ago.
Sure, he got in trouble for it.
And he got in trouble. Okay, so we predicted that. On the other hand, does that affect him as an observant Jew? I would say no, it doesn't. But there are Orthodox Jews who were worried about Tisha B'Av, which is a fast day, and you're not supposed to eat, obviously, and you're supposed to wear sneakers if you're ultra-Orthodox. They were critical of him because Matt Drudge had something on the internet, your modern communications network, that said that he didn't fast because it was the day after he was selected, not nominated, and also he didn't wear sneakers.
Right.
So there's no end. I mean, there's no end to orthodoxy. There's no end to how you want to, in a sense, observe your Judaism. But there is a middle of the road, and we see it in our emails and we see it in our letters, that people would really like to be able to challenge to themselves and feel that they're really Jewish. And that's very, very important today. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a highlight of Judaism for the next 5-10 years, because between Lieberman's nomination, I told a very high official in Israel that I think it was great that Lieberman was nominated, and shows how great our society has become, as you say. And he said to me, I don't care about that. I have an Israeli president, and that's what I care about. So in a sense, the Jews of Israel are nervous a little bit about the Lieberman situation, because he's a Jew and he's going to have to get involved in a peace process, and will he be even-handed? I mean, all this comes into play. Your book came out at the right time. You must have prayed to God at the right moment. We got to cut for a break. We'll come back. We're not going to leave him. He's a terrific intellect, but he's probably a Yale man, right? And what'd you study there, philosophy?
English.
English, same thing. We'll be right back.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD and Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Moleh Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs and Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
We are back. I'm Leon Charney. We're talking about the Talmud and the Internet. It sounds funny, but it's not. It's a great little book that was written by Jonathan Rosen, whom I'm interviewing now, and we're talking a lot about the synthesis of the modern world and the old world, the Talmud representing the old world, the Internet the new world, and as Jonathan says, you create a space for everybody to join in. It was written because of his grandmothers, which he just told you about. One was killed by the Nazis, and the other one was an American-born woman who lived on the East Side and had a totally different life, and he wanted to bring them together. Now we're talking about bringing all Jews together. If we accomplish that on this program tonight, I'll win the Pulitzer, the Nobel, and probably the Jewish prize at the next book fair or something. It's tough to do. Jonathan, what is a practicing Jew in your opinion?
I don't know how to answer that question. But
all right, let me ask you a different question then. At Yale, you had all these Orthodox Jews who were upset about the dormitory issue. I don't know how that worked out. I didn't follow it. What was your opinion about that? Explain it too. You know what I'm talking about.
The Yale Five?
The Yale Five.
Right. I would just say, just to return to your earlier question,
right.
For the Orthodox, it's very easy. 3 things you're supposed to do. You know, you keep kashrut, you keep the holidays, and you observe the laws of the mitzvot, and you observe the laws of ritual purity. For everybody else, it's very difficult to know, are you in, are you out? Is it all or nothing? Can you be a little kosher? Can you be a little bit observant?
And well, if I went to your wife,
right.
who's a rabbi, and a practicing rabbi, and I asked her that question, how would she answer it?
I believe, though I would never want to speak for my wife,
Right.
knowing her liberal soul as I do, that she would define it in a way that allows you to feel you are in fact included. Somebody who makes Shabbat in a certain way but drives to get there is making Shabbat. Somebody who observes certain aspects of kashrut, of keeping kosher, should not be told that that person is actually outside, because there are degrees of mitzvot. There are degrees of observance. There are a very set number of mitzvot, but I don't see Judaism as being an either-or religion.
That we can tell you. There's 613
right.
of mitzvot. So that
but it's not like you fall out of the church and then you can no longer take communion, and so you are cut off and excluded from religious participation. And I think Jews should take full advantage of that element of Jewish culture and see themselves as being included. The Yale 5.
By the way, before I forget, we interviewed David Hartman.
Mm-hmm.
David Hartman is an Orthodox rabbi who runs the Hartman Institute in Israel. Very inclusive. Would probably, I don't want to put words into his mouth, and he's not my wife, but I would not put words into his mouth, but I suspect that he would say the same thing as you did. He's an Orthodox Jew, because he's a really modern Orthodox Jew who's trying to become very inclusive.
Right. Well, the thing I would just add to that, and it speaks to something in my book, is that stories, Judaism is full of stories. I mean, at the most important moment in the Bible, which is the creation of the world, Genesis is filled with stories. And there's something about stories, maybe it's because I'm a novelist as well, that stories are so ambiguous. In a sense, they're the only thing that tells the whole truth, but at the same time, they are not prescriptive. Everyone reads a story in a slightly different way, and the interpretations are infinite. The rabbis often resort to a story in the middle of an extremely detailed, serious, complicated conversation. And the very ambiguity of the stories they tell, the very fact that they're telling stories, has always been an invitation to me to find myself, not just in the stories, but it's a hint that the tradition is broad enough. And in a sense, my book is made out of stories, because that is how I approach the world myself. You asked about the Yale 5?
Correct.
The Yale 5 were 5 Orthodox students who wanted to live off campus their first year. At Yale, you have to live in your residential college. They didn't want to do that because the dorms are co-ed.
Everybody at Yale has to live in the residence hall?
You have a residential college you're affiliated with.
If you lived in New Haven, you want to be a day student, could you do it at Yale? Or you have to live in a dormitory?
I don't know if you can be a day student.
It's
an interesting question.
Is that a good question?
I don't know. They, I guess, wanted the equivalent of being day students, and they could not.
Okay.
Yale sees part of what it means to go to Yale as to live in an integrated environment. And they didn't want to live in co-ed dorms, and they felt that it would expose them to challenges to their Jewishness that would be too great and were not appropriate, were unconstitutional, so they took it to court. I think the case kind of dissolved, though. I don't know that it ever finally had its legal resolution. I myself never had any sympathy for them because I didn't think they had to go to Yale, and because Yale is a private institution. And if they were excluding Jews because they are Jews, that would be, for me, a cause to rally to. But I do not feel that Yale owed them Orthodox, what they saw as Orthodox accommodation, although it should be said that a lot of modern Orthodox Jews do go to Yale and do live in dorms and open themselves up to that experience, and that becomes part of their Yale experience. And in a sense, I think that that was the community that was most insulted in a way, because the implication of the suit was that you cannot be an Orthodox Jew, you cannot be a good Jew, you cannot be an observant Jew, and go to Yale and live in the dorms. If that's true, I think they shouldn't have gone.
By the way, the Yale, I guess it's the emblem of Yale is in Hebrew, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Urim v'Tumim, light and light and truth, but the Urim and Tumim were on the breastplate worn by the high priest. And no one exactly knows what it means, but the Latin translation is Lux et Veritas, which is
anybody ever search why? And it's in Hebrew. It's written in Hebrew, right?
Yes. Well, Ezra Stiles, I believe, who was an early president of Yale, I think made Hebrew a requirement. In those early 18th century days, there was, or maybe even 17th century days, there was Hebrew was a part of the curriculum. And in a sense, it shows, it's like the quote from Isaiah on the Liberty Bell. There are aspects of Jewish Hebrew culture that are woven into the fabric of Jewish American culture. The thing that's interesting for me about Lieberman is that he's not introducing these elements into the culture. He's reminding us that they've always been there, that Christianity was born out of Judaism, that for my mind, the democracy of the United States is born out of monotheism. the great Jewish invention.
But you're right about something you said before, that basically America was born under a Christian culture. On the dollar bill it says, "In God we trust."
Right.
What does that mean?
To my mind, that is entirely appropriate, because I believe that Lieberman is not lying when he invokes God and says that that's in keeping with the values of the Founding Fathers. I mean, my understanding of it is that the great notion of Judaism, which is that there is one God and we are all made in His image, is what eventually leads to the democratic notion, the notion written in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. If you don't have a single God who creates you in His image, then you cannot all be created equal. And so American democracy is a grandchild of Jewish monotheism.
So any citizen of the United States can say his God is that God that is trusted on the American dollar bill. It's not a universal God. It's your particular God.
Right.
But we accept suppose you're an atheist, though. How do you feel about that? An American and you're an atheist.
I mean, then you have you live in a country that protects your right to believe or not believe anything you want.
But your dollar bill is not under God.
But it's still worth 100 pennies.
No, that I agree with.
And
we're into a tricky area right now.
I think that in an interesting way, and it's probably something I encountered a little bit when I was thinking about the Talmud, we live inside of cultures that we did not generate. And so we do not need to reimagine ourselves back into the origins of those cultures in order to live in them. I don't know how the world was created exactly, but I can still breathe the air
there have been arguments on this, especially in court cases when you have to swear on a Bible. There are people who will not swear on a Bible. There are also people who say that when you pledge allegiance to the flag and under God, indivisible, with liberty for all, some people will not do that. I have no problem with people who don't want to do it. I have no problem with it. I just think it's fascinating to examine our culture and to see where the Jews have come in, where the Christians have come in, and what is happening now. And you said something very important before. What is happening is that the America is so great that it can take these diverse cultures, and it's sort of it's in vogue now to be a little bit in a culture of your own. It's voguish in a sense. Whereas take Jews who came out of Germany at the end of the last century. What they want to do is integrate and assimilate. And today, it's not only Jews, but it's Muslims and Christians, etc. And the American experience is the umbrella for all, which is fascinating. Mm-hmm. And Jews have some struggle with it because of Israel, and they really don't know how to confront that issue. The internet excites you, gives you a lot of knowledge, right?
It gives you access to a lot of information, which, with luck, you can convert into something useful.
Right.
But I never expect wholeness, so I never mind.
That's why you eat bagels.
That's why I eat bagels.
Right.
And maybe there's a Jewish connection there, too.
There is.
I've always made do with partial things. I like to read all of a book, but I don't mind. I love lines from a book. I don't have a problem with that.
Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who used to be the chief Sephardic rabbi, I believe, of Israel, and is head of the Shas party, which is a very dominant party in Israeli politics today, made a statement about 2-3 weeks ago, and I bring this up in context with your grandmother from Vienna, that basically the Jews of the Holocaust were killed because they were sinners. That's a paraphrase, I'm not sure. And he was blasted for that statement. And in fact, I think the Attorney General in Israel asked him to tone down or they're going to investigate him. How do you feel about that, since you're talking so much about your grandmother who was wiped out by the Nazis?
Well, I think it's a grotesque perversion of Judaism, frankly. But I found it extraordinarily interesting. And the reason I did, I guess, is because people talk all the time about how American Jews have been disfigured by the Holocaust, so obsessed with it that they have crowded out religious considerations.
There's a new book on that, by the way.
Right.
There's a new book out by
there have been several books criticized. Well, there's one book.
They say it's a Shoah industry.
Right, exactly. I don't know if I'd endorse that particular book. But what I, in fact, want to say is I think that this is an example, what Ovadia Yosef said, about the way that the Holocaust has also disfigured religious Jews. And maybe it's inevitable, but I think that it's not merely secular Jews who clung to the Holocaust as a way out of confronting religious questions. I think it seeped in it was, to my mind, the worst thing in human history. So it's understandable that it would sink in so corrosively. I think that that the belief that the Lubavitcher Rebbe may have been the Messiah is, in its own weird way, a myth to answer the destruction 50 or 60 years ago, and that even that religiously people are groping and grappling. There must be some explanation that God did this terrible thing. For some, the answer is unbelief. For some, it's to become politically involved. For some, it's to make outrageous statements like Ovadia Yosef. But I just think we're only beginning to come to terms with how the Holocaust has affected us in ways we never imagined. And one of them is perhaps theological, because that's what his
I wrote a
statement seems to
paper
be.
when I was in college saying that, and my roommate was a Holocaust survivor, that there is no way for us to understand the Holocaust for probably another 50 years and the ramifications thereof. And the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Holocaust victims, we will never understand totally. I think you got to go generation to generation, and I think your book brings that out, by the way, because, look, you were here in the United States. You were not a Holocaust victim, but it was your grandmother who was the victim, and you're still troubled also. You need those answers. You can't find them. And I agree with you, Ovadia Yosef. The problem is so great, or the tragedy was so humongous in the history of the world, that no one knows the answer, and that they're just trying to find it, and they come up with different and in a way bizarre ideas about what happened. So I have to agree with you on that. We're going to run out of time, Jonathan, so I'm going to ask you two more questions, and then you're free. What brought you so strongly into Judaism? Were your parents very strongly involved?
They were. But they represented different aspects of American Judaism. My father had had an Orthodox childhood in Vienna, which he abandoned when he got older, but was always working his way back to. He had what I would call an Orthodox soul. My mother was the product of my assimilated American-born grandmother, and so I felt both currents probably from the cradle, I guess.
Well, we're out of time. Lucky for us that you had that experience. You produced his book. Jonathan's considered one of the great new young Jewish intellects. And I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot from him. He also writes a lot of reviews for New York Times, and he's very impartial, so people sometimes love him and sometimes don't like him. We haven't read a book yet, so we don't need his review. We'll see you next week.